When it comes to storytelling, one of the most indispensable tools that the artist has is tone, and this can sometimes be a fragile thing. You can spend so much time and resources in world building, characters, and art style, but if you aren't tonally consistent, or if there isn't a method and timing to your decision to break what you've already set, strange, funny, or even damaging things can happen to your story.
I've been waiting for you, friends.
Goldman!
One of the most famous examples of this sort of thing is Tommy Wiseau's The Room.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
This was mostly due to the amateurish nature of the film and a complete failure to recognize the disconnect between the stakes of the movie and the mood that was being portrayed by the performances. The Room is an unintentional masterpiece, but to its cult following and pretty much anyone who's seen the movie, it is recognized as a comedy instead of the heartbreaking drama that Tommy Wiseau intended it to be. In so many ways, this fumbling of tone leads to a horrible condition, and that is one of having fucked vibes. The Room is far from the only project to fail this hard tonally, and video games have been guilty of this since, well, the beginning. But when a game nails its tone, the results are usually immersive, captivating, and in some cases just truly unforgettable. Ember Lab's Kena Bridge of Spirits is one of the latter, even though it did take me a minute to realize what was happening. Ember Labs is a studio that originally made its name in 3D animation, most notably with its breakout Majora's Mask fan film. And in September 2021, the studio took its first steps into video game development, with this title released on PS5 and PC. And while it was used as a visual showcase for the new machines, I only kept it slightly on my radar at the time and even after its release. And this is because from its promotional material and even its box art, I had mistaken the title for another generic mascot-style collectathon. But after seeing it on the store shelves just one too many times, I decided that I should try it for myself. And I'm glad I did, as the game shattered every preconceived thought that I had before checking it out myself. Even with just the title screen, I started to catch on that this game was way different than what I had expected. The quiet shrine in solitude with only the dull clanging wooden chimes denoted a slightly somber and sad atmosphere. And this stood in stark contrast against the modern era Jak and Daxter style game that I had expected. And after just a quick text exposition, I was certain that I had no idea what I had just picked up. Over the length of only 2 paragraphs, the game presented itself as something darker and far more moody than the brief gameplay videos and cover art could have ever possibly prepared me for. With just those small elements, Kena started to slowly unveil itself as an incredibly thoughtful and earnest adventure that housed far more emotional depth and intelligence when it came to how it told its story. Take this scene for example.
You know nothing of suffering. This is my home, my village. Turn back, spirit guide.
Very early on, actually the first cutscene of consequence in the game, you see a depth of emotion cross our protagonist's face as she meets an unnamed spirit. Remorse, anxiety, fear, courage, all of these flicker across her face in just a matter of seconds, and the spirit makes his way through regret, anger, and consternation in an equally convincing manner. Just in these 2 characters' facial expressions, you can tell that there's a lot more going on to this world than we've been privy to. And every interaction in this game carries a similar weight. As the expositional paragraphs let us know, any spirit still wandering this realm of the living is at risk of becoming dangerous as they struggle with the pain and regret that they experienced before their death. And this character here is no exception to that rule. And after this introduction, combat ensues. But beyond this unknown character, Kena meets several characters that all have their own tragedies binding them to this land between, unable to pass on. Kena approaches them all with a similar weight placed upon her shoulders, and to the credit of the amazing animations team, Ember Labs is always able to convey to the player exactly what she and these other characters are feeling. Kena is a spirit guide, and she has come to this place to help the wayward spirits. This is always done by helping these ghosts in some way, whether it is something simple like helping them learn the true nature of what was holding them back, or by helping them come to terms with the consequences of their actions while they were still alive. And pretty much all of these are at the very least bittersweet, and at their most powerful, they are downright heartbreaking. These spirits, and your duty to help them, lays a thick atmosphere onto the game, and this is always coupled with some somber music and some incredibly impressive direction. It is interesting that by choosing this art style, the game walks a tightrope. This is an art style that is not too far removed from things that we've seen come out of studios like DreamWorks or Pixar, so it is only natural to assume that this game would be geared mostly towards a younger audience. But similarly to how BioShock Infinite made a similar choice with designing Elizabeth, Kena and the cast were designed this way to emphasize even the smallest facial tics. By exaggerating their facial features, it makes sure that even the most nuanced emotion comes across vividly. This is a story with some real emotional depth and themes that cover both loss and regret. And sure, like any animated feature worth its salt, this game does welcome a younger audience, but it does so while offering layers of nuance for a more mature crowd. And while the game does cover some heavy stuff, there are always some more lighthearted moments interspersed throughout, and they come most frequently from the entities known as the Rot. These little forest creatures align with Kena early on, mostly for unknown reasons. But they do seem to strike up some sort of understanding with our protagonist on her journey to visit the core of the realm at the mountain shrine. Whether this understanding stems from something as basic as affection, a mystical connection, or possibly even some pity for the mysterious injury that Kena seems to have sustained before the events of this story, the Rot becomes Kena's allies over the course of this game. The Rot serve as helpers for solving puzzles at first, but as collectibles are gathered and more Rot are collected, they begin to assist in combat in the form of special abilities. And it is in this game's combat that Kena takes another step in distinguishing itself as being designed for a more discerning crowd. If you've read anything about this game or checked out other reviews, you usually won't make it too far before this game, like every other recent action game, is compared to Dark Souls. But in my opinion, this is a lazy shorthand. There are some similarities, sure. The combat is tough, enemies do a significant amount of damage with every hit. You have defensive options in the form of a dodge and a parry. Both games share a similar perspective, and attacks are performed with the shoulder buttons. But that is where the similarities end. Kena has all sorts of offensive options that you would never see in a game as deliberately punishing as From Software's game. As you play and unlock skills, you earn the strong Rot abilities that not only have priority and slowdown simultaneously, but these skills cause massive damage. You gain the ability to fight from range and target glowing weak spots, you gain the ability to dash through attacks and bring the fight straight to the enemy, and while jumping or holding down the right stick, you gain the ability to slow time and really pick your shots while fighting with ranged skills. Sure, this game, like seemingly every other modern character action game, has similarities, but by the end, Kena's kit allows her to be fluid on the battlefield in a way that betrays those similarities. But, like anything, it isn't just Dark Souls that Kena can be compared to if we're interested in just making comparisons. I mean, traversal is similar to something like Jak and Daxter or even Uncharted in the way that its hop and bop gameplay interplay with long parkour sections. It could even be called similar to Prince of Persia 2008 or Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice in the way that it focuses on combat arenas instead of wandering foes. And doubly to the former in the way that the environment changes from corrupted to a vibrant green as you make your way through the levels. And while we're at it, it could even be compared to Half-Life 2, the way that your destination is always in view, the way that the Citadel dominates the skyline. But all these comparisons rob the game of what truly makes it stand out. Kena is clearly made by a team that has its influences, but these are people that grew up with these influences, and these are people that have not only been paying attention, but have brought all of that experience with them to create what I can only describe as the adult version of our favorite childhood game. Kena is equal parts collectathon, puzzle platformer, and character action game, but all of these are being done in service of the gameplay and the world building. Very early on, we are shown that the Rot are timid little creatures that hide at a moment's notice and all but disappear in the environment when they feel threatened. And this shows in the gameplay as they go through great lengths to stay incognito, and this sometimes requires some imaginative problem solving in the form of puzzle platforming. And honestly, some of these are good little head scratchers, but they are always built in such a way that the player feels rewarded by their ingenuity and never is left with that feeling of, well, okay, how the fuck was I supposed to know that? Kena is a novice spirit guide, so collecting her abilities or leveling up her health points by meditating are consistent with her growing into her own. And by placing some of these meditation spots at the foot of a downed boss, it goes to reinforce that not only is this a part of your journey, but this is Kena growing as a character. And then there are the relics that we collect, with each bringing us one step closer to the next boss. All of these items hold sentimental value to the wandering spirits and give us an opportunity to better understand the circumstances surrounding their inability to leave, all of which are a pleasure to see. And even the challenging combat serves as a way to show Kena's growth. What started as deliberate, intense tests to control space and evade damage evolved into fast and kinetic battles of building resources and picking your opportunities to unload them. Every bit of this game is definitely built on the work that other games have done over the years. But every bit that is used comes together to define this game's unique identity, not just in some slapdash way that comes across like this game is just playing the hits. And this maturity and nuance is felt everywhere. The characters are personable and their motivations clearly understood, in no small part because of how gorgeously animated they are. The world is vibrant and beautiful, and this game is just really stunning to look at. I mean, just look at it for yourself. But it also functions as a way to reinforce the themes. Fox and owl statues that share real-life analogs to Shintoism and further Japanese folklore litter the landscape. And the voice actress who plays Kana, Ayu as she calls herself, I'm not even going to attempt to say her full name, is a musician and dancer with her background in the gamelan music ensemble Chudamani. But not only is she in that group, but her family is as well, and they came on board to help craft a real authentic soundscape to this world. Kana's world is completely fictionalized, but it is clearly influenced by Southeast Asian cultures, and Ember Labs went through some lengths to make sure that it came across as authentic, even if the influences come from a disparate array of different sources. Everything in Kana is treated with this level of respect, even down to the villains and their personalities. This is not a game where there is a big bad for no real reason other than plot convenience. This is a game where these are spirits who've lost their way, and they were once good people who became lost and twisted after enduring tragedy. Taro was unable to pass without making sure that his younger siblings were safe. Aldira was trapped after the fate of her partner Hana was unknown. And then finally there's the village leader Toshi, who was unable to accept his own fate after making a choice that led not only his people, but the land into ruin. This was a mistake that he realized he made way too late. This was a choice that he mistakenly made while trying to protect his people. None of these characters are evil. The corrupted spirits that you fight in this game are just that, corrupted. But they were not always this way, they were just simply twisted after being unable to pass on. Every moment of importance in this game is handled with expert direction. But if there are any weaknesses in how this game handles its tone, it only shows in little things. To pad out the collectibles list in this game, you don't only collect the rot and abilities, you can also collect little hats for these creatures. I get what Ember Labs must have been going for here. This game may have suffered from being too heavy if they didn't find little ways to lighten the mood. So they made these little creatures as cute and cuddly as they could. And luckily they only linger on them in a few key moments to distract or otherwise lighten the load. But it is clear that Ember Labs saw these little guys as something as a mascot for their new property. Not only are they present in nearly all the promotional art, but they are plastered on all the merchandise for this game, and the physical edition even came with a sticker sheet with all these little creatures. It is a little silly to be able to slap little hats on these guys, but at the same time Ember Labs made use of some really high quality pre-rendered cutscenes for the most important moments of the game, so we never run into those tone-breaking moments where a Rod is wearing a cowboy hat in a crucial scene, as was the case with Jack's atrocious fashion sense in some of the key moments of Stranger of Paradise.
Chaos.
Ember Labs is a really small team, consisting of only 15 core employees, and this is their first at-bat. So the only other places I felt pulled out of the experience was in some of the more amateurish design choices and the occasional bug. First, I know that as the combat evolves, things get a lot more intense and weighty, but in the beginning, the first few attacks at your disposal pack about as much punch as a wet pool noodle. And so that doesn't really anchor you into the combat, at least at first. This alleviated eventually, but as far as first impressions go, this was on the weaker side. Secondly, if you have traversal options such as sprinting, rolling, swinging from a spiritual grappling hook, and dashing, please for the love of God don't make it so that your character can only doggy paddle at an infuriatingly slow pace when they're in the water. Kana's jump is not the best, as it is far more vertical than it is horizontal, so falling into a pool of water is just a thing that can happen. And being forced to swim back to shore while not being able to jump out of the water all at a slow pace is a nightmarish oversight. I mean, I get it, physics are physics, but Kana can double jump, so what the fuck is this? And then there were a few moments where I got stuck under some geometry, and at its worst, I no-clipped through the floor, and Kana found herself trapped in the back rooms. And then finally there's this other thing where only time will tell if it was the smartest move, but our protagonist is the least explored character in this game. There are some mentions of her troubled past and some heartbreaking moments that really help us empathize with the character, but some of her established traits go unaccounted for. I feel like this was clearly being done in hopes of establishing some mystery to be explored in a future sequel, but there are no guarantees for that kind of thing. And as a result, Kana can come across as kind of flat. Kana is clearly a strong and compassionate young woman, and she is definitely one of the more interesting characters in the game in some moments. It is just a shame that her backstory wasn't a little bit more fleshed out, or that we didn't get some resolution for some of the things that had been clearly troubling her. But those small things don't even make a dent in what this game has going for it.
Didn't make a dent?
I mean, first, the game is beautiful and mature, the exploration is nuanced and well-planned, the combat is constantly one-upping itself, culminating in what might be my favorite boss fight in this type of game ever. And the story and characters all had me gripped from beginning to end. Ember Labs doesn't seem to be done with Kana quite yet. There is an anniversary patch on its way later this month, and hopefully there will be some kind of announcement soon for a potential sequel, but it hasn't been confirmed yet. As far as initial outings go, I don't think that this could have gone much better. I'm excited for what the studio does next, and I do hope it's another chapter in this world. I'm curious as to what the identity for this series will be, especially considering the conclusion of this story, and how it definitely leaves our character in a different position. Kana was the kind of game that I never knew I wanted. A while ago, I knew that I wanted to play an old school platformer again, so I went back and played the Spyro Reignited trilogy. But as nice as it was to revisit some of my old school favorites, the nostalgia could never hide the fact that these games were from a bygone era. And by the end of my time with these old games, I found myself wishing for the next evolution in this genre. And in almost every way, Kana met that standard. This was the game that gave me a reason to believe that this genre can grow with its audience. And I just can't wait to see what happens next. Sorry for the sudden change in quality. I had some technical issues that resulted in my last microphone dying. I had it since 2015, so it was probably about time. What stands out most to me about Kana and how it handles its maturity is that in typical video game fashion, whenever a studio is trying to gear something towards a more discerning or mature crowd, they typically go with more edge. Back in the mid-2000s, whenever a new sequel was getting ready to come out, studios would often find ways to darken up their characters or make the world more grimdark. Jak 2 is a perfect example of this. What was once a vibrant world and just hop and bop gameplay became a GTA 3 clone with increased edge and violence. When Prince of Persia: Sands of Time did well enough to warrant a sequel, the studio took a look at it and decided that they wanted to chase a more mature audience as well, and made it so that this once sweet character was suddenly grizzled and angry, and suddenly far more explicit in his language. And then there's Alice Returns. While the whole point of this game was always to have a more grim telling of the Alice in Wonderland story, it too borrowed from the platforming genre, and to gear it towards a more mature audience, they went full dark. Kana is in a unique realm by staying earnest instead of becoming jaded and trying to become edgy. This is a game that is very sincere and uses its mature tones to tell a story without coming across as cynical. And because of that, it really left an impact. And again, I just can't wait for whatever the next installment brings. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you for watching. It's greatly appreciated. And if you like the video, please like, comment, subscribe, you know, all the standard YouTube stuff. Or maybe just drop a comment telling me what your favorite platformer of all time is. This concludes my now 10th video, so I guess I'm starting to get the hang of this. And if you've been watching my channel, the next video is going to be something a bit different. So if you're interested, please tune in. Till then, have a beautiful day, and I'll see you when I see you.